Well guys, it feels like just yesterday when we were talking about how the Virtual Console seemed like it was dead. And sure enough, it was yesterday, and the Virtual Console is dead, according to Nintendo, because Kotaku got a comment from them, where I'll quote them directly, where they said, "There are currently no plans to bring classic games together under the Virtual Console banner as has been done on other Nintendo systems." Again, according to Nintendo spokesperson via Kotaku. So, even though we did touch on this yesterday, where I specifically mentioned I felt like this was the third nail in the coffin for Virtual Console.
We got the fourth.
Yeah. That's it. This cements it. That coffin is locked, it seems. So I guess let's start off with raw reactions. John, what do you think about this?
I'm not really surprised. Like, if they're already giving NES games away with this service, then how are they going to charge for separate NES games? Because they want you to pay for online.
Right.
And the NES game's just kind of incentive with that. So I kind of want them to keep going with this subscription and expand upon that. So I'm not surprised, and I hope that they just sort of keep going with what they currently have and just make it even better. So I'm not that bothered, really, that there's no Virtual Console, because I kind of saw it coming.
Yeah, I'm not surprised or all that bothered, really, either. And while I would like to see them continue with this model, I guess, I kind of do wish it was separate. I wish there was, like, a separate retro game subscription model solution that's completely separate from the Nintendo Switch Online service. I don't really like the two being connected, only because, again, 20 NES games. Okay. But I do see them, again, if Virtual Console is officially dead and not coming to the Switch, I do see them eventually expanding this lineup that you get with your Nintendo Switch Online subscription and kind of, perhaps offering more options down the road. I just hope it doesn't take us too long to get to something beyond NES. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, again, overall, this is kind of what we're already expecting. The writing was on the wall, so not exactly surprised.
Even though we were expecting it, and it was very obvious that this was likely the path they were going to take, this is still one of the most uninteresting ways they could have ever got us into this new service. It's like, by the way, this Virtual Console that you've all been begging for since the Switch was a thing and you realized the potential of it, yeah, we're not going to do that. We would have let you, we have this chance to let you buy your games again and actually have a Nintendo account that connects all of them, so maybe we don't have to charge you again and again for them. But, we really want to keep charging you for these things, and we're just going to tie this into the online. I'm sorry, I know you guys are kind of nonplussed by this, I'll get over it, but this is stupid. The Virtual Console should be at least its own service in addition to this, so you maybe get these extra features or a few games as part of this these freebies or something like that, because it really does feel like, with just how bare bones this is at this moment, it feels like a waste. It feels like a waste of the Virtual Console brand and how much they really could have been banking off this since the beginning of the Switch. And granted, it was nice to see them, the indies, sort of take over that and really capitalize on everything. But to see that this is what we get instead, 20 NES games at the start, and we only know half of them, and they're pretty much the ones that we see all the time. I'm sorry, this isn't interesting.
I get that side. But I don't think that Virtual Console is really that relevant anymore. Like in 2018, back in 2006, it made a ton of sense because people sort of they consumed small media in different ways as we do now. Because nowadays it's all about Netflix and Spotify and having subscriptions to get large chunks of just small digital services. Whereas if you look at like the Wii U sales for Virtual Console, those games barely ever charted. I think like EarthBound and those 30 pence. Games they did at the start of the service, like Super Metroid, they charted, but for the most part, Virtual Console games just went by on Wii U, and on 3DS too. I think only like Pokemon, and some of the first games on that service charted too. So I gotta wonder if people actually, were they buying Virtual Console games on Wii U and 3DS? Maybe that's the reason they've gotten rid of them with this service.
Well, how can you buy Virtual Console games on Wii U if you're not buying a Wii U?
Well, yeah, that is a good point too.
There's that aspect, and we've seen, like, how have we seen any indie? Did we really see any indie games chart on the Wii U as well, outside of like something like huge, like Shovel Knight? That's the thing. We actually have a console that people are buying, people interested in playing stuff on. Put the damn Virtual Console on there so we can actually see if these things chart, see if we get people interested. Because, hey, I can play EarthBound on the go now. I can play Tetris Attack on the go now. I can maybe play even N64 games on the go. And that might come, and that might still come. That might still come to the service. But to start with 20 NES games, that is about the most boring thing you could ever do in Nintendo's case.
Well, I see where you're both coming from, honestly, Derek and John, because, Derek, I agree that this feels remarkably tone-deaf on Nintendo's end. Like, it feels like they're not really listening to the kind of retro solution that that Switch owners want. On the other hand, I do agree with John in that the format of Virtual Console has been made completely irrelevant. Mm-hmm. If they were going to continue with that brand, they needed to reformat it, because I'll tell you right now, as much as I want retro games on my Switch, I don't want one icon equaling one game anymore. I don't want to scroll through, basically, so far, Virtual Console has run on the idea that every little game is its own little mini emulator, and they're like 30, 40 megabytes a piece for NES games. That's crazy. Mm-hmm. So I see where you both are coming from. That we need a retro solution that's better than what we have now for certain. But I don't think the format of Virtual Console as we know it needs to come back on the Switch. It needs to be presented in a different way.
That's well said, Ash. John and I were actually talking a little bit about this yesterday after the discussion, where we were talking about how we've seen a lot of negative comments about the service, with a lot of people lamenting the fact that Virtual Console didn't seem to be back, and we now know isn't back. And I think that's because a lot of people are hung up on the ownership aspect of Virtual Console, which I think is something almost every industry has largely abandoned, as already touched on with Spotify or Netflix or any other of these streaming services. And the thing is, too, remember, when you were buying Virtual Console games, you never actually owned those games either. You bought a license to play those games, only for as long as Nintendo maintains the service, too. It won't be long until you won't be able to download anything off the Wii's Virtual Console anymore, but they're shutting down those servers, right? You already can't buy anything new on there. So, I think, getting back to what John was saying, I think a streaming, or not, I keep calling it streaming, it's not really streaming, but a library of perpetually accessible content is a way to go for Nintendo. Something else John and I think were talking about before, at some point in the past, was that, who's going to spend $5 on, like, Urban Champion or...
Completely landless.
Yeah.
Or any number, not even just bad games, but any number of lesser-known games. You're going to stick to the main games, Zelda, Mario, the ones you know. You're never going to step outside that bubble, but having a subscription-type service would really open up the opportunities to you, because it's not costing you anything. It's like, yeah, maybe I'll dabble in this, random game I never heard of, whereas I would never spend a few bucks to see if it's worth it or not.
Mm-hmm. Totally. I mean, there is that problem with the Wii Virtual Console, where the Wii Virtual Console's library still completely eclipses anything we saw on the 3DS or Wii U, and there were so many little third-party games that, a few that I had seen growing up and never got a chance to play as a kid, or some that I'd never even heard of, and I'm like, man, I do want to play all these, but I'm not going to spend $8 per game just to see if these are games I'd want to play or not.
That aspect of this is the one that has the most potential, because you didn't want to waste your money, especially for something on and beyond NES, where you're paying more than $5. Like, and even on NES, it's still like some games are just not worth that much. But they're going back to your ownership thing, and just as a quick comment, Andre, that seems completely different, because you're claiming you still don't have ownership of the games you bought on Wii. No, I still have those games on my Wii. If I boot up my Wii, I can still play them. If this service disappears from the Switch, I no longer have access to those games. That's the difference, is if the Wii Shop channel, I can't buy any more new games, but I can still play them.
Until your Wii breaks.
Exactly, but that's still some... I mean, that's the case with the NES console. Maybe I could find a new console or something like that, but there's still an aspect of ownership in that case. It's all a moot point in this case, because it's not really what's happening going forward. And the idea of having this a la carte, being able to just pick and choose what you want to play at any one time out of this huge library, that is extremely appealing. We needed a bigger library to start.
Well, that's it. Like, right now, it seems like what could be the beginnings of a Netflix-style service, but it isn't. They just have 20 games, and they said more is coming, but right now it's just for a single platform, so it seems too limited for any kind of comparison to, like, any of these other services we've already mentioned. Like, even, we mentioned Game Pass yesterday on Xbox, and that's much closer to what Nintendo should be doing than what they are doing with this, especially not having a proper Virtual Console now.
Yeah, look, I do get the realities of, I've made some jokes before about how, here we go with the drip feed, like, we're gonna get, Super Mario World and Pilot Wings, and that sucks, but at the same time, I do get that there is a significant business reason to not just throw everything up on there at once. Like, you do have to start with a certain amount and then kind of slowly expand. I do get that. But at the same time, I think it's it's less about the size of the starting library for me.
The
and
variety.
more about the variety too, but really more about the formats. Like only NES. Really, it's just that's the sticking point for me. If we had at least NES and Super NES, I'd be a little more excited about this. But the fact that all they've said is we'll add more NES titles down the line, that's like, okay, but I don't want more NES titles. I want Super NES and other consoles too. So that's I think 20 to start is actually a decent number to start, especially when you consider other virtual console launches in the past. Even though this isn't a virtual console, it's a decent size, I guess. It's just more that it's only NES.
Yeah, and it's essentially like we know Disney's coming out with their own streaming service at some point. It'd be like if they started their service with just only live-action 90s movies. And it's like,
that's actually a great point.
The Tower of Terror made-for-TV movie.
Exactly. It's like, why are you giving me this? I don't care about this. Give me give me what I really want, and that's how I feel about this one.
Well, you don't want Herbie the Love Bug starring Lindsay Lohan?
God.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Yeah, there's also like no shocking title either. Like when you look back at the Wii U, there are a number of Virtual Console titles that are actually quite unique. Like they remade Duck Hunt to work with the Wii Remote, for instance, or they localized, they fully released EarthBound Beginnings, and even on the Wii Virtual Console, the original Wii, we had Super Mario RPG never came out in Europe, but they released that on the European Wii Shop channel. So those are all kind of interesting new releases that we never really had to experience on the original hardware. And we're not really getting any of that here. Like, these are just the bog standard NES games that everyone has played. Like, none of these are surprising.
Well, apparently, John, I saw at least 1 or 2 comments from people saying like, hey, I'm like 5 years old or whatever. I've never played these games before.
Which is great. Play Super Mario Bros. 3. It's the greatest game of all time.
It's true. Well, hey, whoa. It's up there. It's up there.
Yeah. I mean, it's true. Obviously, this is a great way. Well, I mean, I think any way to get in for kids to get into retro games and discover those games, I think is great. So, of course, there are always going to be younger Switch owners for whom this is the first time they've played Super Mario Bros. 1 or 3 or Ice Climber or whatever. And that's great. But it's still not the all-encompassing solution that this could be, because they could still have that entry point into these classic games with a more dedicated subscription-style service. So, again, yeah, it's great that this is fulfilling that kind of entry point for younger Switch owners, but it could still be done in a better way and make a lot more people happy.
Yeah, and the most frustrating thing about this is the fact that the Switch is the perfect console for this, a perfect system to play Nintendo's catalog on.
I gotta say, more and more, is as much as I love my little baby NES and Super NES, and it's cool to be able to have them, and they're great little products, more and more I look at them with disdain, because they are the reason, make no mistake, the Classic line is the reason we are having this conversation right now. If the Classic line did not exist, I bet you there would be a solution, like a retro solution, more along the lines of what we're talking about on the Switch sooner.
So what you're saying is we're not going to see any N64 games at all for at least until the Classic line launches, right?
God, I hope that's not the case. But yeah, I mean, it really does seem to me that this is a case of them cannibalizing their own market with their own retro catalog, where they've offered so many ways for people to get into these games now, and they've also released these $60 to $80 dedicated devices that get people into these games. You know, they kind of risk cannibalizing that Classics market if they introduce a fantastic retro solution on the Switch this soon.
I mean,
at least that's how I see it.
It's an interesting point, because the NES Classic, is almost 2 years old now, right? So it's kind of, whereas the SNES Classic is newer, which that might be why they haven't put SNES games on here yet. They want to fully exploit the Classic version first before they make it available for everyone on this cheap online plan.
The only problem with that idea, though, is that Nintendo is re-releasing the NES Classic over the summer, right before this online service launches.
Well, it's a problem for us in that it kind of backs up what I was saying, in the sense that, I mean, they're just going to keep pushing that Classics line instead of giving us the retro solution that we want on the Switch. Like, that's at least that's the way I see it, is that they're pushing that instead of pushing a retro solution on the Switch. Because again, if they introduce an affordable streaming-based or subscription-based retro solution on the Switch, then why are people going to go shell out for $80 a pop for the SNES Classic, or $60 for the NES Classic?
The Classic does have Super Mario Bros. 2, whereas the online version doesn't. So,
well, I was about to say, I mean, they could still really. Yeah, I mean, I was going to say they could still release games like Donkey Kong Country 2 and Chrono Trigger because those aren't on the SNES Classics, and so. Or Super Mario RPG, like you were saying. Oh no, that is on the Classic, right?
Yeah, so, it's on the Classic.
Yeah.
I guess so. My question then is, what do you think the odds are that Nintendo will ramp up the online service to be more inclusive of a virtual console replacement? Because right now, I would think if that were in the cards, or at least in the immediate future, they wouldn't have branded it simply as like the NES games, right?
Yeah, the way they're officially branding it is basically Nintendo Entertainment System dash Nintendo Switch Online. Mm-hmm. So one would assume they'll eventually have Super Nintendo Entertainment System dash Nintendo Switch Online and so forth. Hopefully, I mean, a year from now, I could totally see this having a wonderful breadth of categories and everything else, or I could see it just being, okay, it's been a year, here's your Super Nintendo games, and then a year later, here's your N64 games, and so forth, and it's just like, ugh. Especially because people want GameCube games immediately, but then here's the thing, I was having a thought, I was like, oh, they could just throw up one GameCube game just to throw us a bone, and the one I thought of is like, oh sweet, just give us like a launch title, like Luigi's Mansion. Oh wait, they're re-releasing that on the 3DS.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's going to happen, that's the thing, we don't know if this is going to be comparable to the Virtual Console, just as a Netflix-like service, even though it's not streaming, but
I'm still, as I touched on yesterday, I'd still be down for this for the existing online service they've announced. That should be the base version, and they should have add-ons, or at least an add-on for like a premium version where you get a larger catalog, a greater selection of games, maybe other bonuses too. Like, hey, maybe here's an E3 demo you can play. I think people would be willing to pay that if they backed it up, because right now the online service is just the basics: cloud saving, the ability to play online to all, and these NES games, which really are barely an extra perk with online play, which is kind of cool. But I think if they offered a premium version on top of that, that would appeal to a lot of people, and I'd be fine with that. I'd be, if they charge another $10 for more access, I'm cool with that.
Yeah, I would be too. I mean, I think that's a great idea and a great approach. I do hope they introduce something like that down the road, maybe. But again, I could maybe see the business angle of, would they be afraid of upsetting consumers by just slowly rolling out these additional tiers, and that could be seen as a cash grab. But again, if you offer actual value there, like, hey, Super Nintendo games, I agree. I think that could work.
Yeah, I kind of wish they just sort of gave more of an outlook at what the future holds for this service, because if you remember when they announced the Wii U Virtual Console, they kind of alongside that stated N64 and GBA games and DS games, well not GBA, GBA and DS games were coming too, but it took so long for those to actually come to the platform that people just kind of fizzled out on those. Mm-hmm. So there's definitely a balance to find there, like you need to sort of say what's coming, but also keep people hooked and do it in a timely manner. And it just seems like they're not doing any of that now.
Yeah, I mean, it really is just a matter, I think, again, I think it's just a matter of how they see their retro catalog, how they see it as a business, and how they perceive that business in relation to its other businesses. And I do think that we might just be looking at a bit of a waiting period until we see kind of how the Classics line continues to exist in orbit of the Switch, and just kind of see how the two interact with one another, or if they just completely stay separate. And for the least the short while, I think that's going to keep happening.
Yeah, I think a big problem with like GameCube games is, for a lot of them, they probably just want to do a remaster. Like with Wind Waker HD and Twilight Princess HD, those can be full-on games. They can be full retail games. So what's their incentive to give them away for free? Well, as part of this service, that is. So it kind of makes more sense for NES games than Super Nintendo games. But yeah, there are so many GameCube games like Luigi's Mansion, what they're doing on 3DS, that they can very well just do from scratch. So yeah, I kind of struggle to see why they would give GameCube games away for free, because they're still pretty in line with like modern design standards.
What I love is that
that's a good point.
What I love is that your first example of them remastering a game is actually a demaster with Luigi's Mansion.
That's true. But I think you did touch on a great point there, John. I mean, we've been talking about how great it would be to have GameCube games, and how that was definitely a persistent rumor for a while, but that's true. I mean, and for a lot of these games, they are still really in line with modern, visual standards to a point, and again, why would they just want to re-release these when they could just get something more out of a remaster? And you're going to hate me for saying this, Andre, but even something like Super Mario Sunshine, I mean, that, to me, makes more sense as a remaster for them to just go back to the drawing board and redo it than just release it as a emulated game on the Switch. That just doesn't seem to make as much sense.
I mean, I'm actually totally down for more remasters. Like, I loved what they did with Wind Waker HD, and I've said before, if they can do for Mario Sunshine what they did with Wind Waker and Wind Waker HD, sign me up. The only problem is I think Sunshine's issues are more fundamental to the gameplay, but that's another issue. But yeah, I mean, I'd be down for more remakes. Like, a lot of those GameCube games already hold up pretty well, so it wouldn't take too much to make them look good on the Switch. Again, we saw that with Wind Waker HD on the Wii U. So yeah, I'm down for that, but as you mentioned, that might be why we're not seeing these games, which unfortunately sucks, because they would be one of the most compelling parts of a online catalog.
The next Fire Emblem on Switch is actually just a remaster of Path of Radiance.
Well, and that's the thing. It doesn't really, it doesn't really help out for those games that will never get a remaster, or may never even see another game for a long time, like F-Zero GX. I think fans at this point would just be happy to have that game re-released because it's looking like we're never going to get a new F-Zero game. I mean, Just
do what Hamster and Sega is doing with their arcade classics and Ages line. Just release a GameCube line of re-releases where you don't do anything to touch them up. Just get them on the damn service so people can buy them.
Mm-hmm. Well, guys, any final points you want to bring up in regards to Virtual Console seemingly being dead?
I think I hit on all my points.
Are you sad at all? Like, are you sad this brand is gone?
I was ready to buy a bunch of games. I was ready to just unload and get a ton of games. I was ready to be able to take on the go with me for the longest time, and that's not going to happen anytime soon. So
yeah, I mean, and to answer your question, Andre, I think I would have been sad about a year ago if this had come out, but just because I have had so much time to kind of come around to the idea that Virtual Console was probably dead, or at least the brand was dead, and that we weren't going to see exactly that solution on the Switch. So it's kind of a mix of, I'm not sad anymore because I've had time to get used to Virtual Console, the brand being gone, but I'm still a little saddened that, kind of as John was touching on, we don't really have much of a way forward in terms of, we don't have much of a path charted forward in terms of what we can expect in the future. So that's kind of depressing, but in terms of Virtual Console as a brand officially being gone, I've let that go. The writing was on the wall, as we've said.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thanks for watching, guys. If you liked our discussion, make sure and like and follow us on Facebook and Twitter at GameXplain. You can find links to them in the description below. You can also find links to our personal Twitter accounts all down there as well, so make sure to give us all a follow. And with that, thanks for watching. And of course, stay tuned to GameXplain for lots more on Nintendo's online service as we find out more about it and everything else Nintendo as well. Catch you later. Bye.